The pen scratched across paper. One signature, one name in the wrong blank space. Eliza Whitmore didn't know it yet, but she'd just signed away her entire life to the most dangerous man in England, a duke who never forgave, never forgot, and never let go. Within 48 hours, her family would celebrate. The lawyers would panic. And Alexander Vane would arrive at her door with a contract that couldn't be broken and a cold smile that promised nothing but ruin. This isn't a love story. Not yet. This is what happens when two people who were never supposed to meet get locked into a battle neither can win and neither can walk away from. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Because what comes next? Nobody saw it coming. The air inside Whitmore House smelled like mildew and regret. Eliza stood in the narrow hallway, one hand pressed against the peeling wallpaper, listening to her mother's voice float down from the second floor. The woman wasn't yelling. She never yelled anymore. She'd learned years ago that quiet disappointment cut deeper. "Eliza, the carriage is waiting." "I know, Mother." "Then why are you still standing there like a ghost?" "Because I feel like one," Eliza thought. But she didn't say it. She pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders, checked the clasp on her worn leather satchel, and headed for the door. Outside, the November wind bit through her coat. The family carriage, if you could even call it that, sat crooked on the gravel drive, one wheel patched with mismatched wood. Their driver, old Thomas, tipped his hat without meeting her eyes. He knew what this errand was. Everyone did. Eliza climbed in without a word. The ride into town was 40 minutes of silence and cold. She didn't mind. Silence had been her companion for years now, ever since her father died and left them with nothing but debts, a crumbling estate, and a family name that used to mean something. Now it just meant obligation. Her younger sister, Charlotte, was 17. Beautiful. Sweet. Everything Eliza wasn't, and Charlotte had a chance, one chance to marry well. A merchant's son. Not titled, but rich enough to pull the Whitmores out of the hole they'd been drowning in. The dowry had been arranged, the contracts drawn up. All that remained was the signing. Eliza was going to the solicitor's office to finalize it. Not because she wanted to, because her mother had looked at her 3 days ago and said, "You're the eldest. You handle it. I can't bear to see those papers again." So here she was, handling it. The law office of Thorne and Griggs sat on a narrow street that smelled like wet stone and coal smoke. Eliza stepped inside, shaking rain from her shoulders. A clerk with ink-stained fingers glanced up from his desk. "Miss Whitmore?" "Yes." "This way." He led her down a dim corridor into a cramped room lined with filing cabinets and stacks of parchment that looked older than the building itself. Behind a heavy oak desk sat Mr. Griggs, thin, pale, with spectacles that magnified his watery eyes. "Ah, Miss Whitmore." Prompt as always. He gestured to the chair across from him. "Please, sit." She sat. Griggs shuffled through a pile of documents, muttering under his breath. Dowry agreement. Whitmore Sterling Union. Yes, here we are. He slid a stack of papers across the desk. Standard terms. Your sister's dowry will transfer upon signing, and the marriage will proceed as planned next month. Eliza scanned the first page. Legal language, dense and dull. She'd seen drafts of this before. "Initial here," Griggs said, tapping a line with one bony finger. "And sign at the bottom." She dipped the pen in ink. Griggs turned away to retrieve another folder from the cabinet behind him. "Apologies, one more item I need to locate. Just a moment." Eliza glanced down at the paper. The text blurred together. She was tired. She hadn't slept well in days. The weight of holding her family together was starting to crack her spine. She signed, her full name, Eliza Margaret Whitmore. Neat, careful letters. She set the pen down. Griggs returned, glanced at the desk, and froze. His face went white. "Miss Whitmore?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Which document did you just sign?" "The dowry agreement. You told me to—" "No!" He snatched up the paper, his hands trembling. "No, no, no! This is—" Eliza's stomach dropped. "What?" Griggs stared at her like she'd just set the building on fire. "This is the marriage contract." The room tilted. "What marriage contract?" "The Duke of Ashford's contract. It was supposed to be filed separately. I must have—" He pressed a hand to his forehead, his face slick with sweat. I placed it on the desk by mistake. You weren't supposed to. Then void it. Eliza stood, her heart hammering. Tear it up. I didn't mean to sign it. It was an accident. Griggs shook his head slowly. It's signed, witnessed by timestamp. The moment your name touched that line, it became legally binding. That's insane. That's law, Miss Whitmore. His voice cracked. The Duke of Ashford's contracts are ironclad. He demanded this specific language precisely to prevent breaches. Once signed, it cannot be undone without his personal consent. Eliza felt the blood drain from her face. The Duke of Ashford? Yes. Alexander Vane? Yes. She'd never met him. But everyone knew the name. The Duke of Ashford was a ghost story whispered in ballrooms and brothels alike. A man who inherited his title at 16 after his father's sudden death and spent the next decade consolidating power with ruthless efficiency. He didn't attend parties, didn't socialize, didn't need to. His wealth was old and vast, his reputation colder than a January grave. People said he smiled once, at a duel, right before he put a bullet through his opponent's shoulder, and Eliza had just signed a contract binding herself to him as his wife. Fix it, she said, her voice shaking. Go to him. Explain the mistake. He'll understand. Griggs let out a bitter, hollow laugh. The Duke of Ashford does not understand mistakes, Miss Whitmore. He crushes them. Eliza didn't remember leaving the office. She didn't remember the carriage ride home. She didn't remember walking through the front door or climbing the stairs to her room. She only remembered sitting on the edge of her bed, staring at her hands and thinking, this is how it ends. Her mother found her an hour later. Eliza? The door creaked open. Did you finish at the solicitor's? Eliza didn't look up. I made a mistake. What kind of mistake? The kind that can't be fixed. Her mother stepped inside, her face tight with worry. What are you talking about? Eliza finally met her eyes. I signed the wrong contract. I'm married. Silence. Then, to whom? The Duke of Ashford. Her mother's face went gray. She sat down slowly on the chair by the window, one hand pressed to her chest. That's not possible. It is. How? The papers were mixed up. I didn't realize. I signed. Eliza's voice broke. I signed, and now I belong to him. Her mother said nothing for a long time. Then she stood, smoothed her skirts, and walked to the door. Where are you going? Eliza asked. To write to the Duke. He won't care. Then we'll make him care. Her mother's voice was hard. You are my daughter. I will not let you be taken by a man who... Who what? Eliza stood. Who holds all the power? Who has the law on his side? Who could destroy us with a single word if we fight him? Her mother flinched. We have nothing, Eliza said quietly. No money, no influence, no leverage. If we try to fight this, he'll bury us. So you'll just... go? Eliza looked out the window at the fading light. I don't think I have a choice. The letter arrived 2 days later. Black wax seal. Ashford's crest stamped in silver. Eliza's hand shook as she broke it open. The handwriting was sharp, efficient, and utterly devoid of warmth. Miss Whitmore, you signed a binding contract. I expect you to honor it. A carriage will arrive for you on the 24th of November at 10 o'clock in the morning. Bring only what you need. Everything else will be provided. Do not attempt to flee. Do not attempt to negotiate. The law is clear, and I do not waste time on theatrics. You are now the Duchess of Ashford. Behave accordingly. A. Vane. Charlotte cried when she found out, sobbed into Eliza's shoulder and begged her not to go. But there was no choice. The alternative was ruin for all of them. On the morning of this 24th, Eliza dressed in her simplest gray gown, packed a single trunk, and stood in the front hall while her mother and sister clung to her like she was walking to the gallows. Maybe she was. The carriage that arrived was black, polished to a mirror shine, pulled by 4 horses that looked like they cost more than Whitmore House. The driver didn't speak, didn't even look at her, just loaded her trunk and opened the door. Eliza climbed inside. The door shut, and the carriage rolled away. The journey took 6 hours. The landscape outside shifted from rolling hills to dense forest to open fields dotted with stone walls. Eliza watched it all pass in silence, her hands folded in her lap, her heart a steady drumbeat of dread. When they finally stopped, it was in front of a house that could have swallowed Whitmore Estate whole and still had room for a village. Asheford Hall, gray stone, tall windows, towers that scraped the sky. It looked like a fortress, not a home. The driver opened her door. Eliza stepped out onto gravel, so white it hurt to look at. A butler appeared. Elderly, silver-haired, expression unreadable. "Miss Whitmore, I am Kerrigan. Please, follow me." She followed. The entrance hall was cavernous, marble floors, a chandelier the size of a carriage, portraits lining the walls, veins stretching back centuries, all of them looking stern and vaguely disappointed. "You'll be shown to your chambers," Kerrigan said. "The Duke will meet with you this evening." "Where is he now?" "Occupied." That was all she got. Her chambers were on the third floor. A suite, actually. Bedroom, sitting room, dressing room. Everything decorated in shades of ivory and gold. It was beautiful, cold, like living inside a jewelry box. Eliza sat on the edge of the bed and waited. He came at 8 o'clock. No knock. The door just opened, and there he was. Alexander Vane, tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair, dark eyes, a face carved from stone and suspicion. He wore black, jacket, waistcoat, boots, like he was in mourning for something. Maybe joy. He looked at her the way someone might look at a stain on expensive fabric. "Stand up." Eliza stood. He circled her slowly, hands clasped behind his back, evaluating, judging. "You don't look like a schemer," he said finally. "I'm not." "Then you're a fool." Her jaw tightened. "It was an accident. Accidents have consequences." He stopped in front of her. "You signed a contract. That makes you my wife. Legally, irrevocably. I didn't mean to, I don't care what you meant." His voice was flat. "Intent is irrelevant. The law is the law." "Then let me go." He laughed. It was a short, ugly sound. "No." "Why not?" "Because I don't make exceptions. Not for you. Not for anyone." He stepped closer, and Eliza fought the urge to back away. "You are now the Duchess of Ashford. You will live here. You will fulfill your duties, and you will not embarrass me." "And if I refuse?" His eyes went colder. "Then I will make your life, and your family's life, a living hell. Your sister's engagement? Gone. Your mother's creditors? Called in? Your house? Seized. I can do all of that before breakfast, Miss Whitmore. So I suggest you adjust quickly." Eliza's hands balled into fists. "You're a monster." "Yes," he said simply, "and now you're married to one. Welcome to Ashford Hall." He turned and walked out, leaving her standing there, trembling with rage and terror in equal measure. The first week was a nightmare. Eliza barely saw Alexander. He was gone most days. "Business," Kerrigan said vaguely. And when he was home, he locked himself in his study and didn't emerge until late. But the house itself was a different beast. The staff was large, dozens of maids, footmen, cooks, groundskeepers, but they moved like ghosts. Silent, efficient, terrified. Eliza noticed it on the third day. A maid dropped a tray in the hall. The crash echoed. The girl froze, tears streaming down her face, like she was waiting to be struck. Eliza knelt beside her. "Are you hurt?" The maid stared at her, shocked. No, Your Grace." "Then don't cry. It's just a tray. Help me pick it up." They cleaned it together. The maid didn't say a word. But when Eliza stood, she saw something flicker in the girl's eyes. Surprise. It happened again. And again. Small moments. A footman who flinched when she walked past. A cook who wouldn't meet her eyes. A housekeeper who spoke in clipped, careful sentences like every word was a potential trap. This house wasn't just cold. It was afraid. And Eliza started to wonder. What kind of man ruled through fear in his own home? Oh, she found out on the 8th day. She'd been exploring, nothing else to do, and ended up in the East Wing. The halls here were darker, narrower, less grand. She turned a corner and nearly collided with a maid carrying linens. "I'm sorry," Eliza said quickly. The maid curtsied. "No harm, Your Grace." "What's your name?" The maid hesitated. Anne, Your Grace. How long have you worked here, Anne? 6 years. Do you like it? Anne's face went carefully blank. It's employment, Your Grace. That's not an answer. Anne glanced down the hall, then back at Eliza. Her voice dropped. May I speak plainly? Please. This house runs on fear. The Duke demands perfection. One mistake and you're dismissed. No reference, no severance, just gone. Anne's hands tightened on the linens. I've seen good people ruined because they spilled wine or forgot to polish silver. The Duke doesn't forgive. Eliza felt something cold settle in her chest. Why do you stay? Because everywhere else is worse. Anne met her eyes. At least here, the pay is steady. If you follow the rules and stay invisible, you survive. Survive, Eliza repeated. Not live. Anne smiled sadly. Living is for people with choices, Your Grace. That night, Eliza confronted him. She found Alexander in his study, bent over a ledger, a glass of whiskey at his elbow. She didn't knock, just walked in. He looked up, irritation flashing across his face. I don't recall inviting you. Your staff is terrified of you. He set down his pen. Good. Good? Fear breeds discipline. Discipline breeds efficiency. He leaned back in his chair. This estate runs smoothly because people know there are consequences for failure. You mean you've turned this house into a prison? I've turned it into a machine. He picked up his glass. One that works. At what cost? That's not your concern. Eliza stepped closer. I live here now. That makes it my concern. Alexander's eyes narrowed. You've been here a week. Don't presume to lecture me on how to manage my household. Then maybe you should manage it better. He stood, slowly. His chair scraped against the floor. He was taller than her, broader. But Eliza didn't move. You have no idea, he said quietly, what it takes to hold power, to maintain control, to keep 1,000 moving parts from collapsing into chaos. I know what it takes to be decent. His jaw tightened. Decency is a luxury, one I can't afford. Why not? For a moment, just a flicker, something cracked in his expression, something raw. But it was gone before she could name it. Get out, he said. No. Get out. Make me. They stared at each other. The air between them crackled. Then Alexander turned away. If you want to play savior, go ahead. Just don't expect me to applaud when it blows up in your face. Eliza left before he could see her hands shaking. Tit. She started small, learned names, asked questions, listened. She found out the cook, Mrs. Brennan, had been skimming money from the household budget for years. Not for herself, for her brother, a drunk who gambled away every penny she sent. Eliza quietly renegotiated the budget, cut off the brother, and gave Mrs. Brennan a raise. She discovered the head groom was selling stable supplies to a rival estate and pocketing the profit. She fired him, promoted his assistant. She noticed the maids were working 16-hour shifts with no breaks. She changed the schedule, added rest periods. The butler protested. She overruled him. And slowly, very slowly, the house started to breathe. People looked at her now, not with fear, with something tentative, fragile, hope. Alexander noticed. You're meddling, he said one evening over dinner. They ate in silence most nights, but tonight he'd decided to speak. I'm managing, Eliza replied. You're coddling the staff. I'm treating them like humans. They're employees. They're people. She set down her fork. People who work harder when they're not terrified of making a single mistake. Alexander studied her. You think you're fixing this house. I think someone needs to. And what happens when they disappoint you? When they fail? Then I'll deal with it, like an adult. His mouth twitched, almost a smile, but not quite. You're naive, and you're cruel. Yes, he said, but I'm effective. Cruelty isn't strength. It's kept this estate running for 10 years. Running? Eliza leaned forward. Or just surviving? He didn't answer. The turning point came 3 weeks in. Eliza was in the library, her favorite room, lined floor to ceiling with books. when Kerrigan appeared, looking pale. "Your Grace, there's been an incident." She stood. "What kind of incident?" "One of the tenant farmers. His daughter fell ill. He came to the house begging for help. The Duke refused." Eliza's blood went cold. "Where's the farmer now?" "Outside. The guards won't let him pass the gate." She didn't wait. She walked straight out of the library, through the halls, down the front steps, and across the courtyard. 2 guards stood at the iron gate, blocking a man in mud-streaked clothes who was on his knees, sobbing. "Let him in," Eliza said. The guards looked at each other. "Your Grace, the Duke gave orders." "I'm giving different orders. Open the gate." They hesitated. "Now." The gate swung open. The farmer stumbled forward, collapsing at her feet. "Please, Your Grace, my daughter, she's burning up. I don't have money for a doctor." "Where do you live?" "Millbrook, Your Grace, 2 miles south." Eliza turned to one of the guards. "Fetch Dr. Harris. Tell him to go to Millbrook immediately. The estate will cover the cost." "Your Grace, the Duke, will hear about it from me." She looked down at the farmer. "Go home. The doctor will meet you there." The man kissed her hand, tears streaming, and ran. Eliza walked back inside. Alexander was waiting in the entrance hall. His face was stone. "What did you just do?" "Sent a doctor to a sick child. That farmer owes me 3 months' rent. He has no right to ask for favors. His daughter is dying." "That's not my problem." Eliza stepped closer. "It is now, because I made it your problem. You overstepped. You were wrong. I don't care if I was wrong." His voice rose. "This is my estate, my rules, and you do not have the authority to undermine me." "Then give me the authority." He blinked. "What? You want me to be the Duchess? Fine. Let me actually be the Duchess. Let me manage the household, the tenants, the staff, all of it." She held his gaze. "Because right now, you're so busy controlling everything that you're letting it fall apart." Silence. Alexander stared at her like she'd just sprouted a second head. Then slowly, he smiled. It wasn't warm, but it was something. "You have no idea what you're asking for." "Try me." He studied her for a long moment, then he nodded. "Fine. The household is yours. But when it collapses, and it will, don't come crying to me." "I won't need to." He walked past her, paused, and said over his shoulder, "You're either very brave or very stupid, Eliza." It was the first time he'd used her name. She didn't know why that made her chest tighten. Mom. The weeks that followed were chaos. Eliza threw herself into the work. She met with every department head, reviewed every ledger, interviewed every tenant. She found corruption, waste, neglect, and she cut it out like a surgeon. Some people hated her for it. Some people loved her. Most were just confused. But the house started to change. The maids smiled. The footmen stopped flinching. The cook hummed while she worked. And Alexander watched. He didn't interfere. Didn't help. Just watched. One night, Eliza found him standing in the doorway of the main hall, staring at a group of maids laughing as they polished silver. "They're happy," he said quietly. "Yes." "I didn't think that was possible here." Eliza looked at him, really looked, and for the first time she saw past the coldness. She saw exhaustion. "When did you stop trying?" she asked. He didn't answer for a long time. Then, "When trying stopped working." "Maybe you were just trying the wrong way." He turned to her. His eyes were dark, guarded. But there was something underneath, something aching. "You're changing this place," he said. "Is that a problem?" "I don't know yet." They stood there, 2 strangers bound by a mistake, staring at each other in the half-light. And Eliza thought, maybe this doesn't have to be a disaster. Maybe it could be something else. But before that thought could settle, the first crack appeared. A letter arrived the next morning, sealed in red wax, unmarked. And when Alexander read it, his face went white. "What is it?" Eliza asked. He crumpled the paper in his fist. "Trouble." "What kind?" He looked at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw something that looked like fear. "The kind," he said slowly, "that could destroy us both." The crumpled letter sat on Alexander's desk like a coiled snake. Eliza stared at it, then at him. His jaw was tight, his knuckles white, where they gripped the edge of the mahogany surface. "Are you going to tell me what it says?" she asked. "Or just stand there looking like the world's ending?" "It might be." He picked up the letter, smoothed it out with shaking hands, and slid it across to her. "Read it." The handwriting was elegant, too elegant, like someone had spent hours perfecting each loop and curve just to make the threat look pretty. "Duke Vane, congratulations on your recent marriage. How fortunate that Miss Whitmore was available, and so conveniently positioned to remedy your legal entanglements. One might almost think she planned it. I wonder what society would say if they knew the truth about how this union came to be. A desperate woman, a careless solicitor, a contract signed in haste. Or perhaps it wasn't haste at all. Expect me at the winter ball. We have much to discuss." L.H. Eliza read it twice. Then she set it down carefully, like it might explode. "Who's L.H.? "Lady Helena Crowley." Alexander's voice was flat. "Widow of Lord Crowley. Runs half the gossip in London. Controls the other half. And she thinks I orchestrated this marriage. She's planting the seed. If she spreads that rumor, it'll catch fire." He turned to the window, staring out at the gray morning. "You'll be labeled a schemer. I'll be labeled a fool. The marriage will be seen as a fraud. Every contract I've ever signed, every alliance I've built. It all falls apart if my judgment is questioned." Eliza's stomach twisted. "So what do we do? We?" He glanced at her. "There is no we in this. You stay quiet. I handle Helena." "How?" "However I have to." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one you're getting." He grabbed his coat from the chair. "The winter ball is in 3 weeks. Until then, you don't leave the estate. You don't write to anyone. You don't give Helena anything to use against us." "You're putting me under house arrest?" "I'm keeping you safe." "By locking me up?" He stopped at the door, his back to her. "You don't understand the world you've stumbled into, Eliza. These people don't fight with fists. They fight with whispers, and once a whisper starts, it never stops." "Then let me help you stop it." "You can't." "Why not?" He turned, and the look on his face made her breath catch. It wasn't anger. It was something worse. Fear. "Because if they dig into you," he said quietly, "they'll find out you're innocent. And that makes me the villain for holding you to the contract. Either way, we lose." He left before she could respond. Eliza stood alone in the study, her heart pounding, the letter burning a hole in her vision. One might almost think she planned it. She hadn't. But who would believe her? The house felt smaller after that. Alexander disappeared into his study for hours at a time, emerging only for meals he barely touched. He stopped asking about her work with the staff, stopped watching her in that unnerving, assessing way. He just shut down. Eliza tried once to talk to him, found him at his desk at midnight, surrounded by correspondence, a half-empty bottle of whiskey at his elbow. "You need to sleep," she said from the doorway. "I need to think. You need to trust me." He looked up, his eyes bloodshot. "I don't trust anyone." "I know." She stepped inside. "But you're going to have to start, because whatever Helena's planning, we can't fight it alone." "There is no we." His voice was hoarse. "You're here because of a mistake. Don't confuse that with partnership." It shouldn't have stung, but it did. Eliza left without another word. She found the answer 3 days later in the library. She'd been digging through old estate records, partly out of boredom, partly because she couldn't sit still while the threat loomed, when she stumbled across a ledger from 15 years ago. It was tucked behind a row of agricultural reports, dust-covered and forgotten. Inside, a list of debts, not Alexander's, his father's, massive debts, to banks, to private lenders, to people whose names Eliza recognized from society columns, people who were still alive, still influential. And at the bottom of one page, a single name circled in red ink, Lord Crowley. Eliza's pulse quickened. She flipped through the ledger, piecing together the story. Alexander's father had borrowed heavily to cover bad investments. When he died, the debts transferred to Alexander, a 16-year-old boy inheriting a crumbling dukedom. And Lord Crowley had been one of the biggest creditors. Eliza checked the dates. The debts were paid off within 5 years of Alexander taking the title. But how? She found the answer in another ledger, a record of asset sales, land, artwork, horses, everything the Vane family had owned that wasn't nailed down, sold to pay the debts. All except one asset, a single notation, marriage contract, negotiation pending, L. Crowley. Eliza's hands went cold. Alexander had been engaged to Helena Crowley. An arranged marriage, political, financial, the kind that paid off debts and secured alliances. But it never happened, because Alexander broke the engagement, and Helena had never forgiven him. Eliza brought the ledger to Alexander that night. He was in the drawing room, staring into the fire with a glass in his hand. He didn't look up when she entered. "You were engaged to her," Eliza said. The glass paused halfway to his lips. "To Helena Crowley. You were supposed to marry her." Alexander set the glass down slowly. "Where did you find that?" "The library. Old estate records. You broke the engagement." "Yes." "Why?" He didn't answer. Eliza stepped closer. "Alexander, if I'm going to help you, I need to know what we're dealing with." "You're not helping me." "Stop saying that." Her voice cracked. "Stop shutting me out. We're in this together whether you like it or not." He stood abruptly, the firelight casting harsh shadows across his face. "You want to know why I broke the engagement? Fine. Because Helena Crowley is a viper. She wanted the title, the money, the power. She didn't give a damn about me. And when I refused to be her puppet, she made it her life's mission to destroy me. So this letter is revenge, pure and simple." He laughed bitterly. "She's waited 15 years for the perfect moment to strike. And you, stumbling into my life, signing that contract, gave her exactly what she needed." Eliza's chest tightened. "She's going to claim I seduced you into marriage to trap you. Worse, she's going to claim I knew you were doing it and went along with it because I was desperate." "Are you?" His eyes snapped to hers. "What?" "Desperate. Are you?" The silence stretched between them like a wire pulled taut. "Yes," he said finally. "I've been desperate since I was 16 years old and inherited a title I wasn't ready for and debts I couldn't pay. I've spent 15 years clawing my way out of that hole, and now Helena's going to shove me back in because she can't stand that I chose freedom over her." Eliza's throat burned. "Then we prove her wrong." "How?" "We show everyone that this marriage is real, that it wasn't a scheme, that we—" She hesitated. "That we chose this." Alexander stared at her like she'd lost her mind. "No one will believe that. They will if we make them." "Eliza, the winter ball. You said it's in 3 weeks. We go together. We present a united front. We make Helena look like a jealous ex-lover spreading lies." "That's insane." "It's strategy." She crossed her arms. "You've spent years controlling this estate through fear. Maybe it's time to control society the same way." He shook his head. "You don't know what you're asking. These people will tear you apart. Let them try." For the first time in days, Alexander looked at her, really looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. "You're serious?" "Completely." He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling hard. "If we do this, there's no turning back. You'll be stepping into a battlefield." "I've been on one since the day I signed that contract." Eliza met his gaze. "At least this time, I'm choosing the fight." He studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. "All right, we'll go to the ball. Together." He picked up his glass again. "But if this blows up in our faces, don't say I didn't warn you." The next 2 weeks were a blur. Eliza barely slept. She worked with the staff during the day, managing the household with ruthless efficiency, and spent her evenings preparing for the ball. She needed to look the part, act the part, be the part. Alexander hired a dressmaker from London. The woman arrived with trunks full of fabric and sketches, her eyes sharp with curiosity. "The Duchess needs a gown," Alexander said curtly. "Something that makes a statement." The dressmaker smiled. "What kind of statement?" "That she's untouchable." Eliza stood through 3 fittings, pins jabbing her ribs, fabric pooling at her feet. The final gown was midnight blue silk, cut low at the shoulders, with intricate silver embroidery that caught the light like stars. When she saw herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. "You look like a duchess," the dressmaker said. Eliza wasn't sure if that was a compliment or a warning. "What?" Alexander taught her how to navigate society. They spent hours in the drawing room, him firing questions, her answering. "Who's the current Minister of Trade?" "Lord Ashton." "Wrong. He resigned last month. It's Sir Richard Pembroke now." Eliza groaned. "How am I supposed to remember all this?" "Because if you don't, they'll eat you alive." He leaned back in his chair. "Society isn't about being smart. It's about being informed. The moment you reveal ignorance, they'll use it against you." Sounds exhausting. It is. She watched him, this man who'd built walls so high even he couldn't see over them. "Why do you do it?" "Do what?" "Play their game. If you hate them so much, why not just leave?" His jaw tightened. "Because leaving means losing, and I don't lose." "Even if it cost you everything?" He didn't answer. 3 days before this ball, a second letter arrived. This one wasn't from Helena. It was from Eliza's mother. "Dearest Eliza, I hope this letter finds you well. Charlotte's engagement has been finalized, and the wedding is set for spring. We are managing, though the house feels empty without you. There are rumors circulating in town about your marriage. Whispers that it was not entirely proper. I do not know what to believe. Please write and tell me the truth. Your loving mother." Eliza read it twice, her hands trembling. The rumors had already started. Helena was moving faster than they'd anticipated. She found Alexander in the stables, inspecting a new horse. He looked up when she approached, saw her face, and his expression darkened. "What happened?" She handed him the letter. He read it in silence, then crumpled it in his fist. "It's starting." "What do we do?" "We accelerate." He turned to the stable hand. "Prepare the carriage. We're leaving for London tonight." "Tonight? The ball's not for 3 days." "Exactly. We need to get ahead of this." He looked at her, his eyes hard. "If Helena's already spreading rumors in the countryside, they'll hit London by tomorrow. We need to be there first. Control the narrative before she does." Eliza's stomach flipped. "How?" "By making an entrance she won't forget." They arrived in London at dawn. The city was waking up, vendors shouting, carriages clattering over cobblestones, smoke rising from chimneys. Alexander's townhouse was in Mayfair, a sleek Georgian building with black railings and white columns. Inside it was as cold as Asheford Hall, all polish and no warmth. "We have 2 days," Alexander said, pacing the drawing room. 2 days to make sure every influential person in London knows we're a united front." "How do we do that?" "We show them." He stopped, turned to her. "Starting today, you're not just the Duchess of Ashford. You're a force. We'll attend every event, every salon, every dinner we can get into, and you'll charm every single person in that room." "I don't know how to charm people." "You charmed my staff. You'll figure it out." Eliza's pulse raced. "And if I fail?" "Then we both go down." No pressure. The first event was that afternoon, a garden party hosted by the Duchess of Somerset. Eliza wore a pale green dress, her hair pinned in a style the lady's maid insisted was fashionable. Alexander walked beside her, his hand at the small of her back, a possessive gesture that made her spine stiffen. "Relax," he murmured. "You look terrified." "I am terrified." "Don't show it." They stepped into the garden. 50 people turned to stare. Eliza felt their eyes like knives. A woman in a lavender gown approached, smiling like a cat. "Duke Vane, how lovely to see you, and this must be your new bride." "Lady Pembroke." Alexander inclined his head. "May I introduce the Duchess of Ashford?" Lady Pembroke's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Charmed. I've heard so much about you." "All good, I hope," Eliza said, matching her tone. "Of course." The smile sharpened. "Though one does wonder how such a whirlwind romance came to be." There it was, the first jab. Eliza felt Alexander tense beside her, but she didn't flinch. "Love doesn't follow a schedule, Lady Pembroke. Surely you understand that." Lady Pembroke blinked, then laughed, a brittle surprise sound. "Indeed, how refreshing." She drifted away, and Eliza exhaled. Not bad, Alexander murmured. I think I'm going to be sick. Later. Right now, we have 20 more people to impress. They survived the garden party. Barely. By the time they returned to the townhouse, Eliza's face hurt from smiling. Alexander poured them both a drink, brandy, strong enough to burn. You did well, he said. I lied through my teeth. That's what society is. He raised his glass. One long, elaborate lie. Eliza sank into a chair, exhaustion pulling at her bones. How do you stand it? I don't. I endure it. She looked at him, this man who wore armor so thick she wondered if he even remembered what it felt like to take it off. Do you ever get tired? She asked quietly. Of what? Fighting. All the time. For everything. He was silent for a long moment. Then, every day. Something in his voice cracked just slightly, and Eliza saw it. The weight he carried. The loneliness. You don't have to fight alone anymore, she said. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. Don't make promises you can't keep. I'm not. The air between them shifted, charged. Alexander set down his glass and stood. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be worse. He left before she could respond. Eliza sat in the silence, her heart pounding, wondering what the hell she'd just signed up for. The next day, they attended 3 events: a luncheon, a gallery opening, a dinner. Eliza smiled until her cheeks ached. She answered questions with practiced ease. She laughed at jokes that weren't funny and pretended not to notice the stares. And slowly, agonizingly slowly, the whispers started to shift. She's charming, more graceful than I expected. Perhaps the Duke chose well after all. But not everyone was convinced. At the dinner, a man with silver hair and cold eyes approached. Lord Ashton, former Minister of Trade. Duchess, he said, his voice smooth. I must say, your marriage has caused quite a stir. Change often does, Lord Ashton. Indeed. He sipped his wine. Though one wonders if it was truly change, or simply opportunism. Eliza's pulse spiked, but she kept her face calm. I'm afraid I don't follow. Come now. A woman of modest means suddenly married to one of the wealthiest men in England? It's a rather convenient turn of events. Alexander stepped between them, his voice ice. Careful, Ashton. You're speaking to my wife. Ashton smiled. Of course. My apologies. I meant no offense. But the damage was done. The seed was planted. That night, Eliza couldn't sleep. She paced her room, replaying every conversation, every glance, every whispered word she'd overheard. They were losing. Helena's poison was spreading faster than they could counter it, and tomorrow was the winter ball, the final test. A knock at the door startled her. Come in. Alexander stepped inside, still dressed, his hair disheveled. He looked exhausted. I can't do this, Eliza said before he could speak. Yes, you can. No, I can't, her voice broke. I'm not strong enough. I'm not clever enough. I don't belong in this world, and everyone knows it. Alexander crossed the room in 3 strides and grabbed her shoulders. Listen to me. You've spent the last month taking apart a household that terrified grown men and rebuilding it into something functional. You've faced down corruption, inefficiency, and a duke who didn't want your help, and you won. You think you're not strong enough? You're the strongest person I know. Eliza stared at him, her breath catching. Tomorrow, he said, his voice low. You walk into that ballroom, and you show them exactly who you are. Not some scared girl who made a mistake. A duchess. My duchess. And you make them believe it. What if I can't? His grip tightened. Then I'll burn the whole place down and we'll start over. She laughed, a sharp, startled sound. You're insane. Probably. He released her, stepped back. Get some sleep. Tomorrow, we go to war. The winter ball was held at the Crowley estate. Of course it was. Helena wanted home field advantage. The ballroom was a cathedral of wealth. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, gold leaf everywhere. Hundreds of people in silks and jewels, all pretending they weren't sharks circling blood. Eliza wore the midnight blue gown. Alexander wore black, as always. They descended the staircase together, every head turned. And at the far end of the room, standing beside a towering ice sculpture, was Helena Crowley. She was beautiful, blonde, poised, draped in emerald green, and when she saw Eliza, she smiled. It was a predator's smile. "Here we go," Alexander murmured. Helena glided toward them, her gown trailing like a war banner. "Duke Vane," she purred, "and the mysterious Duchess. How kind of you to attend." "Lady Crowley," Alexander's voice was cold. "Your invitation was hard to refuse." "I'm sure it was." Helena's eyes flicked to Eliza. "My dear, you look lovely, though I must confess I'm surprised to see you here after all of the talk." Eliza forced a smile. "Talk is cheap, Lady Crowley. I prefer action." Helena's smile thinned. "How bold. I do hope you know what you're doing." "I could say the same to you." The air crackled. Helena laughed, light, airy, false. "Enjoy the evening, Duchess. I do hope it lives up to expectations." She swept away, leaving a wake of whispers. Alexander leaned close. "Stay sharp. She's planning something." "I know." The ball continued. Dancing, drinking, polite conversation masking ruthless judgment. Eliza danced with Alexander twice. He was a good dancer, controlled, precise, but there was no joy in it. "You're tense," she said as they turned. "So are you." "I have reason to be." "So do I." She looked up at him. "What's she going to do?" "I don't know, but it'll be public, humiliating. She'll want an audience." As if on cue, the music stopped. Helena stepped onto the raised platform at the front of the room, a glass of champagne in her hand. "My dear friends," she called out, her voice carrying effortlessly. "Thank you for joining me this evening. I have a special announcement." Eliza's stomach dropped. Helena's smile widened. "As many of you know, Duke Vane and I were once close. Very close, and while our paths diverged, I've always wished him well." Lies. Every word. "So imagine my delight," Helena continued, "when I learned of his marriage to Miss Whitmore. Such a romantic story. A chance meeting. A hastily signed contract." She paused, letting the words sink in. "Almost too romantic, wouldn't you say?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "In fact," Helena said, her tone sharpening, "I couldn't help but wonder, was it romance or something else entirely?" Eliza's heart hammered. Helena reached into her bodice and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I recently came into possession of a very interesting letter written by Miss Whitmore's own solicitor. Shall I read it?" "No," Alexander said, his voice cutting through the room. But Helena ignored him. She unfolded the paper and began to read. "To whom it may concern, I write to confess my role in facilitating a fraudulent marriage contract between Miss Eliza Whitmore and Duke Alexander Vane. Miss Whitmore approached me with a proposal." "That's a forgery!" Eliza shouted. The room fell silent. Helena looked at her, eyes gleaming. "Is it? Then why does it bear Mr. Grigg's signature?" Eliza's blood turned to ice. Alexander stepped forward, his face a mask of fury. "Where did you get that letter?" "Does it matter?" Helena's smile was triumphant. "The truth is out, Duke Vane. Your marriage is a sham, and everyone here knows it." The crowd erupted in whispers. Eliza stood frozen, the world tilting beneath her feet. This was it. The end. But then Alexander did something she never expected. He laughed. Not a bitter laugh, a real one, loud and genuine. The room went quiet again. "You want the truth, Helena," Alexander said, his voice carrying. "Fine. Here it is." He turned to Eliza, took her hand, and looked straight into her eyes. "I didn't choose this marriage. Neither did she. It was a mistake, an accident, a ridiculous bureaucratic accident that should never have happened." Eliza's breath caught. "But," Alexander continued, still holding her gaze, "it did happen, and instead of running from it, we faced it, together. She walked into a life she didn't want with a man she didn't know, and she didn't break. She fought. She adapted. She made this marriage real." He turned back to Helena. "So yes, the contract was an accident, but what we built from it, that's the truth. And no forged letter is going to change it." The room was dead silent. Helena's face went pale, then red. "You're lying." "Prove it." She couldn't. Alexander stepped off the platform, still holding Eliza's hand. "We're leaving. Anyone who wants to keep spreading lies can do it without us. They walked toward the exit, the crowd parting like water. Eliza's legs felt like jelly, but she kept moving. They made it to the door, and then Helena's voice rang out one last time. "This isn't over, Alexander." He didn't turn around, just called over his shoulder, "Yes, it is." They stepped into the night, the cold air hitting them like a slap. Eliza's hands were shaking. "What just happened?" "We won." Alexander let out a long breath. "For now. She's going to come after us again. Let her try." Eliza looked at him. This man who'd just defended her in front of everyone who mattered, who'd chosen her. "Thank you," she whispered. He met her eyes, and for the first time his expression wasn't guarded. It was open, raw. "Don't thank me yet," he said quietly. "This war isn't over." But as they climbed into the carriage and rolled away from the Crowley estate, Eliza realized something. She wasn't afraid anymore. She was ready to fight. The carriage rattled through London's empty streets. The only sound, the clatter of wheels on cobblestone and the hard rhythm of Eliza's breathing. She sat across from Alexander, watching him stare out the window at the darkness sliding past. "You didn't have to do that," she said finally. "Yes, I did. You made yourself look weak. Admitting the marriage was an accident, I made myself look honest." He turned to her, his face half in shadow. "Helena wanted to paint us as schemers. I took away her brush. By telling everyone the truth? By telling them enough of it." His jaw tightened. "The accident part they'll believe because it's ridiculous enough to be real. The part about us making it work? That's the lie that'll save us." Eliza's chest constricted. "So everything you said back there was strategy. What did you think it was?" She didn't answer. Couldn't. Because for a moment, just one brief, stupid moment, she'd thought it might be real. The carriage jerked to a stop outside the townhouse. Alexander climbed out first, didn't offer his hand. Eliza followed, her dress catching on the step. She stumbled, caught herself, and walked inside alone. The butler was waiting in the hall. "Your Grace, a letter arrived while you were out." Alexander took it, broke the seal, scanned the contents. His face went hard. "What is it?" Eliza asked. He crumpled the paper. "Nothing you need to worry about." "Stop doing that." "Doing what?" "Shutting me out every time something goes wrong." She stepped closer. "We're supposed to be in this together, remember? Or was that strategy too?" He looked at her for a long moment. Then he handed her the letter. It was from Mr. Griggs. "Duke Vane, I write to inform you that I have been served with a summons to appear before the Court of Chancery regarding the validity of your marriage contract. Lady Helena Crowley has filed a petition claiming fraud and coercion. The hearing is set for 1 week from today. I must also confess that the letter she presented at the ball was not a complete forgery. I did write to a colleague expressing concern about the circumstances of the contract signing. That correspondence was stolen from my office 3 weeks ago. I never imagined it would be used in this manner. I am prepared to testify on your behalf, but I fear the damage may already be done. Respectfully, J. Griggs." Eliza read it twice. The words blurred together. "She's taking this to court." "Yes." "Can she do that?" "She just did." Alexander poured himself a drink, downed it in one swallow. "Helena doesn't make empty threats. If she's filed with Chancery, she has something. Evidence, witnesses. Something we don't know about yet." "Then we find it." Eliza's voice was steadier than she felt. "Before the hearing." "We have 7 days." "Then we'd better start now." Alexander studied her, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. "You should go back to Asheford Hall. Let me handle this." "Absolutely not." "Eliza—" "No." She crossed her arms. "You just stood in front of half of London and claimed we built this marriage together. Was that a lie? Or are you actually going to let me help?" The silence stretched between them. "Fine," he said finally. "But if this goes badly, you get out. You take the annulment, you go home, and you forget you ever met me." "That's not going to happen." "It might have to." She wanted to argue, but the look on his face stopped her. He wasn't trying to protect his pride. He was trying to protect her, and that scared her more than anything Helena could do. They started with Griggs. The solicitor's office was in chaos when they arrived the next morning. Papers scattered across every surface, filing cabinets hanging open, the man himself pacing like a caged animal. Your Graces. He nearly tripped over a stack of ledgers. I've been going through everything, every file, every record, trying to determine what else might have been taken. And? Alexander's voice was clipped. 2 other documents are missing. One is a letter from Miss Whitmore's mother to me asking about the dowry arrangements. The other is a draft contract, an earlier version of the marriage agreement that included a clause about financial compensation. Eliza's stomach dropped. What kind of compensation? Griggs wouldn't meet her eyes. Standard practice in arranged marriages. The bride's family receives a settlement. In this case, I drafted language suggesting £10,000. I never saw that clause, Eliza said, because it was removed from the final version. The Duke refused it. Griggs looked at Alexander. You said you wouldn't pay for a wife. I won't. Alexander's voice was ice. But Helena doesn't know that clause was removed. She'll use the draft to claim Eliza married me for money. It gets worse, Griggs said quietly. The letter from Mrs. Whitmore mentions financial difficulties. If Helena pairs that with the draft contract, it creates a narrative. Desperate family, struggling daughter, convenient marriage to a wealthy duke. Eliza felt sick. My mother was just asking about Charlotte's dowry. It had nothing to do with me. It doesn't matter what it was about. It matters what it looks like. Alexander turned to Griggs. Who has access to your office? My clerk. The cleaning staff. Clients, of course, but they're supervised. Who was here 3 weeks ago, when the documents were stolen? Griggs fumbled for a ledger, flipped through pages. Let me see. I had appointments with Lord Ashton, Lady Pembroke, Mr. Sterling. Wait. Eliza's pulse spiked. Mr. Sterling? Charlotte's fiancé? Yes. He came to review the final dowry agreement for his marriage to your sister. Alexander and Eliza exchanged a look. Where's Sterling now? Alexander asked. I believe he's still in London, staying at the Langham Hotel. They left before Griggs could say another word. The Langham was one of London's finest hotels, all polished marble and obsequious staff. The concierge tried to block them from going upstairs, but one look from Alexander sent him scurrying. They found Mr. Sterling's room on the 3rd floor. Alexander pounded on the door. It opened to reveal a young man in shirt sleeves, his face flushed with wine. He blinked at them. Duke Vane? We need to talk. Sterling glanced at Eliza, confusion clouding his features. About what? About why you were in Griggs' office 3 weeks ago. The color drained from Sterling's face. I was finalizing the dowry agreement for my marriage to Charlotte. And did you happen to notice any other documents while you were there? I don't know what you're talking about. Alexander stepped forward, his voice dropping to something dangerous. You're a terrible liar, Sterling. Someone stole correspondence from that office the same day you were there, and now it's being used to attack my wife. So I'll ask you one more time. What did you see? Sterling backed up, his hands raised. I didn't take anything, I swear. But you saw something. Sterling hesitated, then quietly. There was a woman. She arrived after I did. Claimed she had an appointment, but Griggs wasn't expecting her. His clerk stepped out to fetch him, and she went behind the desk. I thought it was odd, but I didn't think it was my business. What did she look like? Blonde, well-dressed. She had this way of moving, like she owned the place. Helena, Eliza breathed. Sterling's eyes widened. Lady Crowley? I didn't realize. Did she take anything? Alexander demanded. I don't know. I left right after. I didn't want to be involved in whatever. He stopped, swallowed hard. Look, I'm about to marry into your wife's family. I don't want trouble. Then you should have spoken up 3 weeks ago. Alexander turned to leave, then paused. If you breathe a word of this conversation to anyone, I'll make sure that dowry agreement disappears, understood? Sterling nodded frantically. They left him standing in the doorway, pale and shaking. Outside, Eliza's mind raced. She was in Griggs' office. She took the documents herself. Which we can't prove, Alexander said. Sterling's testimony won't hold up. He's biased. He's marrying into your family. Any judge will dismiss it. Then we find another way to prove it. How? Eliza stopped walking. We make her admit it. Alexander stared at her. You've lost your mind. Maybe. But think about it. Helena's entire strategy depends on secrecy. She sneaks into offices, steals documents, spreads rumors. She doesn't fight in the open because she can't risk exposure. So we drag her into the open. We force her hand. Eliza's pulse quickened. We set a trap. What kind of trap? She told him. And with every word, his expression shifted from skepticism to something that looked almost like admiration. That's insane, he said when she finished. It's the only way. He shook his head slowly. If this goes wrong, we'll have nothing left. Then we'd better not let it go wrong. They spent the next 3 days preparing. Alexander reached out to his few remaining allies, Lord Davenport, Sir Marcus Hale, the Countess of Wexford, people who owed him favors or hated Helena enough to help. Eliza wrote letters. To her mother. To Charlotte. To people she'd met at the garden parties and dinners. She didn't ask for help, just planted seeds. Mentioned how strange it was that private correspondence had gone missing, how coincidental the timing seemed. And then they waited. Helena took the bait faster than expected. A letter arrived on the 4th day, hand-delivered by a footman in Crowley livery. Duchess Whitmore, I hear you've been making inquiries. How industrious. Perhaps we should speak in person. I'll be at St. Crispin's Church tomorrow at noon, alone. Come, and I'll tell you everything you want to know. H.C. Eliza showed it to Alexander. He read it, then threw it into the fire. No. It's exactly what we wanted. It's a trap. She's luring you out alone to... He stopped, ran a hand through his hair. I don't know what she's planning, but it's not a conversation. Then come with me. She said alone. So we make her think I'm alone. Eliza stepped closer. You stay hidden. I go in, get her talking, and when she reveals something incriminating, you step out with witnesses. Witnesses? Where are we getting witnesses? Davenport? Hale? The Countess? You said they'd help. I said they'd testify at a hearing, not skulk around a church waiting to ambush Helena Crowley. Then convince them. Eliza met his eyes. Because this is our only shot. Alexander stared at her for a long moment. Then he swore under his breath and reached for his coat. St. Crispin's Church sat on the edge of Mayfair, a stone building with narrow windows and a graveyard that smelled like wet earth and old roses. Eliza arrived at 5 minutes to noon, alone. Or at least she appeared to be alone. Alexander, Davenport, and Hale were positioned in the vestry, hidden behind the heavy wooden door. The Countess of Wexford waited outside in a carriage, ready to serve as a neutral witness if needed. Eliza pushed open the church door. It creaked loudly in the silence. Helena was standing near the altar, bathed in colored light from the stained glass windows. Right on time, Helena said. I appreciate punctuality. Eliza walked down the aisle slowly, her footsteps echoing. You wanted to talk. So talk. Helena smiled. I wanted to see if you'd actually come. Most women in your position would have sent their husband to fight their battles. I'm not most women. No, you're not. Helena circled her, studying. You're braver than I expected, or more foolish. I haven't decided which. Why did you do it? Eliza asked. Steal the documents, file the petition, all of it. Because Alexander humiliated me. Helena's voice turned sharp. 15 years ago, he broke our engagement in front of my entire family, said he'd rather die alone than spend a lifetime with me. Do you have any idea what that does to a woman's reputation? So this is revenge. This is justice. Helena stopped in front of her. He took everything from me, my future, my standing, my chance at real power, and now I'm taking it back. By destroying an innocent woman? Helena laughed. You're not innocent. You signed that contract. You waltzed into his life and took the title I should have had. I didn't take anything. It was an accident. Was it? Helena's eyes glittered. Or did you see an opportunity and grab it with both hands? I would never. Wouldn't you? Helena pulled a folded paper from her sleeve. I have a letter from your mother, begging Griggs to find a way to secure your family's future, talking about debts and desperation. You expect me to believe you had no idea what that contract said when you signed it? Eliza's hands clenched. My mother was talking about Charlotte's dowry. Prove it. I don't have to. The truth will come out at the hearing. Will it? Helena stepped closer, her voice dropping. Because I have 3 witnesses ready to testify that you approached Griggs weeks before the signing, that you asked specific questions about the Duke's contracts, that you planned this. That's a lie. It's my word against yours, and I have money, influence, and a very talented barrister. Helena's smile widened. You have nothing. Eliza's heart pounded. This was it, the moment. I have something you don't, she said quietly. And what's that? The truth. Helena rolled her eyes. How tedious. I expected better from... The vestry door swung open. Alexander stepped out, followed by Davenport and Hale. Helena went white. Every word, Alexander said. We heard every word. Helena's composure cracked. This is... You can't... Can't what? Use your own confession against you? Alexander moved closer, his voice hard. You just admitted to stealing documents, to bribing witnesses, to fabricating evidence, in front of 2 peers and a duke. It won't hold up in court, Helena said, but her voice shook. You orchestrated this. Trapped me. Yes, Alexander said simply. Just like you trapped us. Helena looked between them, her face twisting. You think this changes anything? I'll still file the petition. I'll still drag your names through the mud until... No, you won't. The voice came from the church entrance. Everyone turned. A man stood silhouetted in the doorway. Tall, silver-haired, impeccably dressed. He stepped into the light, and Eliza's breath caught. Lord Chief Justice Harrington, the most powerful judge in England. Your Grace. Harrington inclined his head to Alexander. Lord Davenport sent word you might require assistance. Helena took a step back. This is a private conversation. Not anymore. Harrington's voice was cold. Lady Crowley, I've just been informed of some very serious allegations. Theft, fraud, witness tampering. These are criminal matters. I haven't been charged with anything. Yet. Harrington looked at Alexander. Duke Vane, do you wish to press charges? Alexander didn't take his eyes off Helena. That depends. Lady Crowley, are you prepared to withdraw your petition? Helena's jaw clenched. And if I refuse? Then I'll see you in court. And in prison. He stepped closer. You wanted to destroy me, Helena. You failed. Now walk away, or I'll make sure you regret ever speaking my name. The silence in the church was absolute. Helena's hands trembled. Her face had gone from white to red to something sickly pale. She looked like she might be sick. Fine, she said finally. I'll withdraw the petition. And the documents you stole? I'll return them. And the witnesses you bribed? I'll pay them off. They won't testify. Alexander nodded slowly. Good. Then we're done. Helena turned to leave, then stopped. She looked at Eliza, her eyes full of venom. You think you've won, she said quietly. But you'll never be one of us. You'll always be the girl who didn't belong. And one day, he'll realize it too. She walked out, her heels clicking against stone. The door slammed shut behind her. Eliza exhaled, her legs suddenly weak. Alexander caught her elbow, steadied her. It's over, he said. Harrington cleared his throat. I'll ensure the petition is formally withdrawn. And Duke Vane, you have my word. If Lady Crowley attempts anything of this nature again, she'll find herself in front of the bench, the criminal bench. Thank you, my lord. Harrington nodded and left, Davenport and Hale following. And then it was just Eliza and Alexander standing in the empty church. We did it, Eliza whispered. You did it? Alexander's voice was rough. The trap. The plan. That was all you. I couldn't have. Yes, you could have. He turned to her, and the look in his eyes made her heart stutter. You walked into a church alone to face a woman who wanted to destroy you. You stood your ground. You didn't flinch. He stopped, swallowed hard. You're remarkable, he said quietly. Eliza couldn't breathe. Alexander! The church door burst open. Both of them spun. A man in servant's livery stumbled in, gasping for breath. Your Grace, Duke Vane, you have to come. What happened? It's Asheford Hall. There's been a fire. Eliza's heart stopped. How bad? Alexander demanded. The East Wing, it's gone. And there are casualties. Alexander's face drained of color. Who? Staff, Your Grace, Mrs. Brennan, the cook, 2 maids. They were trapped. He didn't wait to hear the rest. He ran. Eliza ran after him. Bokand. The ride back to Asheford took 4 hours at a brutal pace. By the time they arrived, the sun was setting, painting the smoke-filled sky in shades of orange and red. The east wing was a blackened shell. Walls collapsed, windows shattered. The smell of burned wood and worse things hung thick in the air. Survivors huddled in the courtyard. Staff members wrapped in blankets, faces streaked with soot and tears. Alexander dismounted before the carriage fully stopped. He strode toward Kerrigan, who stood near the ruins, his usually composed face shattered. How many? Alexander's voice cracked. 3 confirmed dead. Mrs. Brennan, Anne, one of the housemaids, and Thomas, the stablemaster. 5 others injured. Kerrigan's hands shook. It started in the kitchen, spread faster than we could contain it. Eliza felt the ground tilt beneath her. Anne, the young maid who'd told her what it was like to work in fear, who'd started to smile in the weeks since Eliza took over, gone. Where are the injured? She asked. The parlor. Dr. Harris is with them. Eliza didn't wait for permission. She ran. The parlor had been converted into a makeshift hospital. 5 people lay on makeshift cots. Burns, smoke inhalation, broken bones from falling debris. Dr. Harris moved between them, his face grim. Eliza knelt beside the nearest cot. A young footman, barely 20, his left arm wrapped in bandages. Your Grace, he whispered, don't talk. Save your strength. Mrs. Brennan, she tried to save us. Went back in for Anne. The ceiling, his voice broke. Eliza took his hand. I know. I'm so sorry. She stayed with them through the night, held hands, changed bandages, whispered reassurances she wasn't sure she believed. Outside, Alexander coordinated the cleanup, organized temporary housing for displaced staff, sent for more doctors, worked until his voice was hoarse and his hands were raw. But he never came inside, never looked at the injured, never acknowledged the dead. Dawn broke gray and cold. Eliza found him in the ruins of the east wing, standing where the kitchen used to be. His clothes were filthy. His face was stone. Alexander. He didn't turn. You need to rest. I need to rebuild. Later. Right now you need... This is my fault. His voice was barely audible. I knew the kitchen stove was old. I knew the wiring was faulty. I knew, and I did nothing because I was too busy fighting Helena and managing the estate and... He stopped, his shoulders shaking. 3 people are dead because I didn't fix a broken stove. Eliza stepped closer. This wasn't your fault. Yes, it was. No. She reached for him, made him look at her. Accidents happen. Buildings fail. You can't control everything. I should have tried harder. You're not invincible, Alexander. You're human, and humans make mistakes. He stared at her, his eyes raw with something that looked like grief. I don't know how to do this. Do what? Care. The word broke on his lips. I spent 15 years building walls so I wouldn't feel anything, so I couldn't be hurt, and now... He gestured helplessly at the ruins. Now it hurts anyway, Eliza finished quietly. He nodded. She took his hand, then let it hurt. Stop fighting it. Stop trying to control everything. Just feel it. For a long moment, he stood frozen. Then, slowly, he crumpled. Not physically, but the armor, the coldness, the control. It shattered. And Alexander Vane, the Duke of Asheford, the man who never broke, buried his face in his hands and wept. Eliza held him while he fell apart, held him while he mourned, held him until the sun climbed higher and the smoke began to clear. And when he finally pulled away, his eyes were red but clear. I'm rebuilding the East Wing, he said hoarsely. Properly this time. Safe, modern, whatever it costs. Good. And I'm doubling the staff's wages, setting up a fund for families of anyone injured on the estate. Also good. He looked at her. You were right. About all of it. Fear doesn't build loyalty. It builds resentment. And when disaster strikes, he gestured at the ruins, people die. So what are you going to do differently? I don't know yet. He wiped his face. But I'll figure it out. We'll figure it out, Eliza corrected. Something shifted in his expression. We. Yes. He studied her for a long moment, then quietly, Why are you still here? What do you mean? Helena's gone. The petition's withdrawn. You could walk away, go home. Forget this ever happened. Is that what you want? I want you to choose. His voice was raw. Not because of a contract, not because you're trapped. I want you to choose. Eliza's throat tightened. I already did. That night at the ball, when you asked if I was ready to fight, I chose then. Why? Because you're worth fighting for. She stepped closer. You're cold and controlling, and you make terrible decisions when you're scared. But you're also brave and brilliant, and you care more than you'll ever admit, and I'm not walking away from that. Alexander stared at her like she'd just rewritten every rule he'd ever known. Then, slowly, carefully, he reached for her hand. She took it. And standing in the ruins of everything he'd tried to protect, Alexander Vane made a choice of his own. He let her in. But 40 miles away, in a London townhouse, Helena Crowley sat in her study with a glass of wine and a letter freshly arrived from the continent. She read it once, twice. Then she smiled. The letter was from a man named Victor Asheford, Alexander's uncle, the one who'd been disinherited 20 years ago for reasons no one talked about. And he was coming back to England, with evidence that would destroy everything Alexander had built. Helena folded the letter carefully and tucked it into her desk. The battle wasn't over. It was just beginning. The rebuilding started at dawn the next day. Alexander stood in the courtyard with a team of architects from London, surveying the blackened skeleton of the East Wing. Eliza watched from the parlor window as he gestured at the ruins, his voice carrying across the gravel even though she couldn't make out the words. He hadn't slept. Neither had she. The funerals were scheduled for tomorrow. Mrs. Brennan, Anne, Thomas, 3 people who'd worked at Ashford Hall for years, reduced to names on headstones. Eliza turned away from the window and went back to the injured. The young footman with the burned arm was awake, sitting up against pillows. His name was Peter. How are you feeling? She asked. Better than I should be, Your Grace. He managed a weak smile. Dr. Harris says I'll keep the arm. That's good news. I heard the Duke's rebuilding, making it safer. He is. Peter looked down at his bandaged hand. My father worked here, before the old Duke died. He always said this place would be the death of him. Turns out he was right. He fell from a scaffold repairing the North Tower. No safety rails, no compensation. Just a burial, and a new hire to replace him. Eliza's chest tightened. I'm sorry. Not your fault, Your Grace. Peter met her eyes. But people are watching now, to see if things really change, or if it's just talk. She thought about that all morning. Change wasn't a single decision. It was 1,000 small ones, repeated until they became the new normal. And right now, Ashford Hall was watching to see if the Duke meant what he'd said, or if grief was just making him sentimental. Alexander came inside around noon covered in ash and looking like he'd aged 10 years overnight. The architects want to tear down the entire wing and start from scratch, he said without preamble. New foundation, fireproof materials, modern ventilation. It'll cost a fortune. Then spend it. He looked at her. Just like that? You want people to believe you've changed? Show them. Eliza stood. Spend the money. Build it right. And make sure every worker on that site goes home safe at the end of the day. That's not how construction works. Accidents happen. Then make them happen less. She stepped closer. You spent 15 years running this place like a machine. Now run it like a home. He stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned and walked back outside. An hour later, she heard him shouting at the architects about safety protocols. The funerals were small, quiet, just staff and a few tenant farmers who'd known the deceased. Eliza stood beside Alexander at the gravesides, watching 3 coffins lowered into cold earth. He didn't cry, didn't speak, just stood rigid as stone while the vicar said words that probably meant something to someone but felt hollow to her. When it was over, the staff filed past, offering condolences. Some looked at Alexander like they weren't sure who he was anymore. Others looked at Eliza like she might have answers. She didn't. Kerrigan approached as the last mourners drifted away. Your Grace, there's been a development. Alexander's jaw tightened. What kind? A man arrived at the gate this morning, claims to be your uncle, Victor Asheford. The color drained from Alexander's face. Eliza had never heard that name before. Who's Victor Asheford? My father's younger brother. Alexander's voice was flat. He was disinherited 20 years ago. I thought he was dead. He's very much alive, Kerrigan said, and he's demanding to speak with you. Says he has information about the estate that requires immediate attention. Where is he now? I had him wait in the main hall. He's persistent. Alexander turned to Eliza. Go back to the house. I'll handle this. No. Eliza, I'm tired of being sent away every time something dangerous shows up. She held his gaze. We're doing this together, remember? He looked like he wanted to argue, but he didn't. They walked back to the house in silence. Victor Asheford was standing in the main hall, examining a portrait of the late Duke with an expression that could have been nostalgia or contempt. Hard to tell. He was tall like Alexander, but thinner. Graying hair, sharp features, and eyes that missed nothing. He wore a traveling coat that had seen better days and boots caked with road dust. When they entered, he turned and smiled. It was not a friendly smile. Alexander, you've grown. Victor. Alexander's voice was cold. What do you want? Is that any way to greet family? Victor's gaze slid to Eliza. And who's this? Don't tell me you actually married. The Duchess of Asheford, Alexander said. My wife. Victor's eyebrows rose. Duchess? How impressive. He looked her up and down. Bit plain for a duke's wife, isn't she? Eliza felt Alexander tense beside her. She put a hand on his arm. I'm standing right here. If you have something to say it to me. Victor laughed. Spirit, I like that. You'll need it. Married to him. What do you want? Alexander repeated. Victor pulled a folded document from his coat. I want what's mine. This estate, the title. All of it. You were disinherited. Under false pretenses. Victor unfolded the paper. I have a copy of your father's original will, the one he wrote before he was coerced into changing it. Alexander snatched the document, scanned it. His face went white. Eliza looked over his shoulder. The handwriting was shaky but legible, and the contents were clear. The estate was to be divided equally between the two sons, not left entirely to Alexander. This is a forgery, Alexander said. Is it? Then why does it bear your father's seal? Why is it witnessed by the family solicitor, the same man who handled your inheritance? Because you paid him to fake it. Prove it. Victor's smile widened. Or acknowledge that I have a legitimate claim to half of everything you own. Eliza's mind raced. If this document was real, or even convincing enough to hold up in court, it would tie up the estate in litigation for years. Every contract, every decision Alexander made could be challenged. Why now? She asked. Why wait 20 years? Victor turned to her. Because I've been on the continent, Duchess, building my own fortune. Or trying to. Turns out the world's less forgiving when you don't have a title. His voice turned bitter. I came back to make amends. Imagine my surprise when I heard about the fire, about the deaths, about how my dear nephew is finally trying to be a decent human being. And you thought you'd capitalize on that, Eliza said. I thought I'd claim what's rightfully mine. Victor tucked the document away. I'm not asking for everything, just half. We split the estate, the income, the responsibilities. Fair. There's nothing fair about this. Alexander's hands clenched. You're a liar and a thief, and whatever game you're playing, I'm playing by your rules, Alexander, the ones your father taught us both. Power goes to whoever can hold it. Victor turned toward the door. I'll be at the Red Lion Inn. You have until the end of the week to decide. Negotiate with me, or I file with the courts, and we let them decide. He walked out, leaving silence in his wake. Alexander stood frozen, the document still clenched in his hand. Is it real? Eliza asked quietly. I don't know. His voice shook. My father was sick before he died, unstable. He changed the will 3 times in his last year. I never saw this version, but that doesn't mean it didn't exist. Then we verify it. We find the solicitor who witnessed it. We check the records. That solicitor is dead, and my father burned most of his records before he passed." Alexander looked at her, and she saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Defeat. "Victor knows I can't prove it's fake," he said. "That's why he's here. He's betting I'll pay him off rather than risk losing everything in court." "Then don't pay him." Eliza took the document from his hand. "Fight him." "With what?" "I just spent every available pound rebuilding the East Wing. I don't have the resources for a legal battle." "Then we find them." "How?" She didn't have an answer. Not yet. That night, Eliza couldn't sleep. She paced her chambers, her mind churning through possibilities. Victor wanted money. That much was clear. The will was leverage, nothing more. If they could find proof it was forged, or prove that Victor had no legitimate claim, the whole thing collapsed. But how? She thought about the staff, about the tenants, about everyone who'd lived through the late Duke's final years. Someone had to remember something. At dawn, she started asking. She found Kerrigan first. "The old Duke's illness, what kind was it?" Kerrigan looked uncomfortable. "Mental decline, Your Grace. He became paranoid, accused people of plotting against him. Toward the end, he barely recognized his own sons." "Did he change his will during that time?" "Multiple times, but the final version was clear. Everything to Alexander. Victor was written out completely." "Why?" Kerrigan hesitated. "Because Victor tried to have him declared incompetent, to seize control of the estate while the Duke was still alive." Eliza's pulse quickened. "Can you prove that?" "There were letters, legal threats. I don't know if they still exist." "Where would they be?" "The Duke's personal effects, if Alexander kept them." She found Alexander in the study surrounded by ledgers and correspondence. He looked up when she entered. "Your father's personal papers. Where are they?" "Storage." "Why?" "Because if Victor tried to steal the estate once before, there's a record of it, and that record proves he's a liar." Alexander stood slowly. "The storage room hasn't been opened in 15 years. "Then it's time to open it." "Well, the storage room was in the attic, behind a locked door thick with dust." Alexander broke the lock with a crowbar, and they stepped into a space filled with trunks, crates, and the ghosts of the past. It took hours to sort through. Letters, deeds, bills of sale, the accumulated debris of a dukedom. Eliza found it in a trunk at the back, wrapped in oilcloth, a stack of correspondence between the late Duke and his solicitor. She spread the letters out on the floor. And there it was. A letter from Victor, dated 18 years ago, demanding that his father be declared mentally unfit and the estate placed under Victor's guardianship. The solicitor's response was scathing. "Your brother is ill, not incompetent. This petition is without merit and borders on elder abuse." Another letter from the Duke himself, shaky but furious. "Victor seeks to rob me while I yet breathe. He is no son of mine. The estate goes to Alexander alone." And finally, the revised will. The one that disinherited Victor completely. Signed, sealed, witnessed, legitimate. Eliza looked up at Alexander. "This is it. Proof that the will he's showing is either fake or superseded." Alexander knelt beside her, reading the letters with shaking hands. "He tried to have my father declared incompetent so he could seize control, and when that failed, he disappeared. And now he's back with a forged document, hoping you don't have the records to fight it." "But we do." "We do." Alexander sat back, exhaling hard. "We take this to a judge, show that Victor has a history of attempting to defraud the estate. His claim falls apart. And he goes away. Hopefully for good this time." Eliza gathered the letters carefully. "We should move fast, before he realizes we found this." Alexander stood, pulled her to her feet, and for a moment they just stood there, surrounded by old papers and new hope. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For not giving up. For fighting when I wanted to surrender." He looked at her, and the vulnerability in his eyes made her chest ache. "I don't know what I did to deserve you." "You let me in," Eliza said. "That's enough." They presented the evidence to Lord Chief Justice Harrington 2 days later. Harrington read the letters slowly, his expression darkening with each page. When he finished, he set them down and looked at Victor, who sat across the table with his forged will and a face that had gone pale. "Mr. Asheford," Harrington said coldly, These letters suggest you attempted to defraud your late father 18 years ago. Would you care to explain? Victor's jaw worked. That was a misunderstanding. My father was ill. I was trying to protect. You were trying to steal. Harrington tapped the correspondence. And now you return with a will that conveniently grants you half an estate you were legally and rightfully disinherited from. A will that contradicts the final, properly witnessed and sealed version held by the courts. I can explain. I'm sure you can, and you'll have the opportunity to do so in front of a magistrate on charges of fraud and attempted theft. Victor shot to his feet. You can't. I can, and I will. Harrington nodded to the bailiff standing by the door. Take him into custody. Victor's face twisted with rage. He looked at Alexander. You think this is over? You think it is over? Alexander's voice was quiet but final. You lost. Again. Victor lunged across the table. The bailiff grabbed him, hauled him back. He fought, shouting obscenities until they dragged him from the room. Silence settled in his wake. Harrington gathered the letters. I'll ensure these are filed with the estate records. Mr. Victor Ashford will face charges. If convicted, he'll be barred from ever making a claim on the Ashford estate again. Thank you, my lord, Alexander said. Harrington stood. Duke Vane, a word of advice. Your father's estate management left much to be desired. I suggest you ensure your own records are beyond reproach, so this doesn't happen again. I will. Harrington nodded and left. Alexander and Eliza sat in the empty chamber, the weight of the confrontation slowly lifting. It's done, Eliza said, for now. You think he'll try again? Not if he's in prison. Alexander leaned back, exhausted. But men like Victor don't change. If he gets out, he'll find another angle. Then we'll deal with it when it happens. Eliza stood, offered her hand. Together. He took it. Oh. Word spread fast. Within days, everyone in London knew that Duke Vane had defeated his uncle's fraudulent claim, that he'd exposed a decade-old conspiracy, that the marriage everyone thought was a scandal had produced a duchess who'd saved the estate from ruin. The invitations started arriving, dinner parties, salon gatherings, requests for audiences. People who'd whispered about Eliza at the winter ball now wanted her at their tables. Alexander threw most of the invitations in the fire, but one caught Eliza's attention. It was from the Duchess of Somerset, the woman who'd hosted the first garden party, the one where Eliza had barely survived. Duchess Asheford, I write to extend my sincerest apologies for any discourtesy shown during your initial introduction to society. It is clear now that I misjudged both you and your marriage. I would be honored if you and the Duke would join me for tea next week. I believe we have much to discuss. Yours, Duchess of Somerset. Eliza showed it to Alexander. She's apologizing. She's hedging her bets, Alexander said. Now that you've proven you're not going anywhere, she wants to be on your good side. Should we go? Do you want to? Eliza thought about it. The woman had smiled like a predator and asked cutting questions designed to humiliate. But she'd also been operating on incomplete information, fed by Helena's poison. And maybe, just maybe, there was value in showing society that the Duchess of Ashford didn't hold grudges. Yes, Eliza said. We should go. The tea was awkward at first. The Duchess of Somerset, Catherine, sat across from them in her drawing room, pouring tea with hands that shook slightly. I must admit, Catherine said, I was entirely wrong about you. Most people were, Eliza replied. Yes. Well, Catherine set down the teapot. Helena Crowley can be very convincing. I believed her version of events without question. That was a mistake. Why are you telling me this? Catherine met her eyes. Because I've spent 30 years in society watching women tear each other apart over scraps of power and approval, and I'm tired of it. What you did, standing up to Helena, fighting for your marriage, saving your husband's estate, that took courage. Real courage. Not the performative kind we parade at balls. Eliza didn't know what to say. Catherine continued. I'd like to make amends, if you'll allow it. How? By introducing you properly. To the women who actually matter, not the gossips and social climbers, the ones who run charities, influence policy, make things happen. Catherine leaned forward. You have a voice now, Duchess. Use it. Eliza glanced at Alexander. He looked as surprised as she felt. What kind of things? Eliza asked. Whatever you care about. Education for working-class children, safety regulations for estate workers, healthcare access for tenant families. Catherine smiled. You've already changed one estate. Why stop there? The idea settled in Eliza's chest like a spark catching tinder. She'd spent weeks fighting just to survive, to prove she belonged, to keep her marriage intact. But what if she did more than survive? What if she used the position she'd stumbled into to actually change things? I'd like that, Eliza said. Catherine's smile widened. Good. Then let's begin. Over the next month, Catherine introduced Eliza to a network of women who wielded power in ways society didn't acknowledge. They funded orphanages, lobbied parliament, ran schools and hospitals, and reform initiatives. Eliza threw herself into it. She started with the estate. New safety protocols for construction, a fund for injured workers, education programs for tenant children. Then she expanded. She partnered with Catherine to draft a proposal for factory safety regulations, presented it to sympathetic members of parliament, testified, terrified but determined, in front of a committee. It didn't pass. Not the first time. But it got attention. And slowly, agonizingly slowly, the conversation shifted. People stopped seeing her as the girl who'd accidentally married a duke. They started seeing her as someone who got things done. Alexander watched it all with something that looked like awe. You're relentless, he said one night, finding her at her desk surrounded by correspondence. I learned from you. I was relentless out of fear. You're relentless out of hope. He sat down across from her. It's different. Is it working? You've accomplished more in 6 months than I did in 15 years. He smiled, a real smile, not the cold corporate mask. Yes, it's working. Eliza set down her pen. I couldn't have done any of this without you. You could have. You would have found another way. Maybe, but I'm glad I didn't have to. He reached across the desk, took her hand. So am I. The air between them shifted, charged. Alexander, I need to tell you something. His voice was rough. I didn't fall in love with you the day you signed that contract, or the day you confronted Helena, or even the day you walked into that church alone. Eliza's heart hammered. When? The day after the fire, when you stood in the ruins and told me it was okay to feel, to stop fighting and just break. He looked at her, and his eyes were raw. No one had ever given me permission to be human before. And in that moment, I realized I didn't want to do this alone anymore. I wanted to do it with you. Eliza couldn't breathe. I know this started as a mistake, Alexander continued, but it's the best mistake I've ever made. And if you'll have me, not as a duke, not as a contract, but as a man who's trying very hard not to ruin the best thing that's ever happened to him, I'd like to start over, properly this time. Eliza felt tears prick her eyes. You're asking me to marry you? We're already married. I'm asking you to choose me, knowingly, willingly, not because you're trapped, because you want to. She stood, walked around the desk, and pulled him to his feet. I choose you, she said. I've been choosing you for months. I just didn't think you'd notice. He laughed, surprised, relieved. I'm an idiot. Yes, but you're my idiot. He kissed her then. Not the polite, performative kiss they'd exchanged at the winter ball. A real kiss, desperate and grateful, and full of all the things neither of them had known how to say. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Alexander rested his forehead against hers. We're going to mess this up, he said. I'm going to make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. It's going to be hard. I know. But we'll do it together. Yes, together. Kitsid. 6 months later, they stood in the rebuilt East Wing. It was beautiful, modern, safe, everything the old wing hadn't been. The staff gathered for the unveiling, more staff now, better paid, better treated. They applauded when Alexander cut the ribbon, and when he stepped aside and gestured for Eliza to speak, she felt the weight of every choice that had brought her here. This wing, she said, her voice carrying across the crowd, is a promise that the people who work here matter, that their safety matters, that they're not replaceable parts in a machine, they're the heart of this estate. She looked at Alexander. He nodded. And it's a reminder, Eliza continued, that change is possible, even when it's hard, even when it hurts, even when it feels impossible. The applause was thunderous. Afterward, as they walked back to the main house, Alexander took her hand. "You've changed everything," he said quietly. "We changed everything." "No, you did. I just finally stopped fighting it." Eliza smiled. "Then I guess we both learned something." They reached the entrance and Alexander paused. "What?" Eliza asked. He looked at the house, this massive, cold estate that had felt like a prison for so long. "It feels different now." "How?" "Like a home." Eliza squeezed his hand. "That's because it is." And for the first time in 15 years, Alexander Vane believed her. 3 years passed like water through cupped hands, fast enough to feel fleeting, slow enough to leave marks. Asheford Hall transformed. The East Wing became a model for estate safety across England. Other landowners visited, studied the designs, implemented changes. Workers' protection laws, the ones Eliza had fought for, finally passed Parliament on the third attempt. The vote was narrow, but it counted. Eliza stood in the gallery that day, watching the final tally come in. Catherine sat beside her, tears streaming down her face. "We did it," Catherine whispered. "Not yet," Eliza said. "This is just the beginning." She was right. The law created ripples. Factory owners complained. Traditionalists called it government overreach. But worker deaths dropped. Injuries decreased. And slowly, grudgingly, society adjusted. Eliza's reputation shifted with it. She wasn't just the Duchess of Ashford anymore. She was the woman who'd rewritten the rules. Not everyone appreciated that. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in late spring. Eliza was in the estate office, reviewing quarterly accounts with Kerrigan, when Alexander walked in holding a piece of paper like it might bite him. "We have a problem," he said. Kerrigan excused himself quickly. Eliza set down her pen. "What kind?" Alexander handed her the letter. It was from the Home Office. Formal language, polite threats, the kind of bureaucratic knife wrapped in silk. The summary: an inquiry had been opened into the Ashford estate's labor practices. Anonymous complaints alleged that workers were being coerced into supporting the Duchess's political activities, that wages were conditional on participation in reform efforts, that the entire operation was a front for radical agitation. "This is absurd," Eliza said. "Our workers aren't coerced into anything." "I know that. You know that. But someone's filed official complaints, and now we have government inspectors coming to interview staff." Alexander sat down heavily. "If they find anything, even something that looks questionable, it gives ammunition to everyone who wants to see your work dismantled." "Who filed the complaints?" "The letter doesn't say. Anonymous." But Eliza already knew. Helena. It had been quiet for 3 years. Too quiet. Helena had withdrawn from society after the church confrontation, retreated to her country estate. Everyone assumed she'd accepted defeat. Apparently not. "When are the inspectors coming?" Eliza asked. "Next week." "Then we prepare. We open every record. Make every staff member available. We show them there's nothing to hide. Eliza, these people aren't looking for truth. They're looking for ammunition. One disgruntled worker, one misunderstood payment, one conversation taken out of context. That's all they need." She met his eyes. "Then we make sure they don't find it." Oh. The staff meeting that night was tense. Eliza stood in the main hall with every employee gathered, maids, footmen, groundskeepers, stable hands, the whole operation. Over 100 people. "Government inspectors are coming," she said without preamble. "Someone's accused us of coercing you, of forcing you to support political causes in exchange for wages." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "I want to be clear," Eliza continued. "You are not required to participate in anything beyond your job duties. You never have been. If anyone has felt pressured, if anyone has experienced retaliation for refusing to engage in political work, speak now. I will fix it." Silence. Then Peter, the young footman who'd been burned in the fire, stepped forward. His arm had healed, though scars still marked his skin. "Your Grace," he said, "permission to speak freely?" "Granted. I've worked here for 7 years. Under 3 different regimes if you count the old Duke, the early Duke Vane days, and now. This is the first time anyone's asked what I think, the first time I've felt like my safety matters more than the silver polish. He looked around at the other staff. If someone's accusing you of coercion, they're lying. A murmur of agreement. Another voice spoke up, a maid named Sarah. I participated in the testimony for the safety bill because I wanted to, because my brother died in a factory collapse, and I don't want that to happen to anyone else. Nobody made me do it. More voices joined, stories of choosing to help, of feeling heard for the first time, of wanting to be part of something bigger than just keeping a house running. Eliza felt her throat tighten. "Thank you," she said quietly. "When the inspectors arrive, tell them the truth. Whatever it is. I won't punish honesty." The staff dispersed slowly, returning to their duties. Alexander waited until they were alone. That could have gone badly. But it didn't. You're trusting them to tell the right story. I'm trusting them to tell their story. Eliza turned to him. That's the difference. The inspectors arrived on Monday. 3 men in dark suits, carrying leather portfolios and expressions that suggested they'd already made up their minds. The lead inspector, a thin man named Hargrove, barely looked at Eliza when they met. "Duchess," he said, his tone suggesting the title was questionable, "will need access to all employment records, financial ledgers, and correspondence related to political activities." "Of course," Eliza gestured to Kerrigan. "Everything's prepared." They spent 3 days combing through documents, interviewing staff, asking questions designed to find cracks. Eliza watched from a distance, resisting the urge to hover. Alexander paced like a caged animal. On the 4th day, Hargrove requested a private meeting. They convened in the drawing room. Hargrove sat across from Eliza and Alexander, his portfolio open on his lap. "I'll be direct," he said. "We found no evidence of coercion." Eliza's shoulders dropped with relief. "However," Hargrove continued, "we've identified what could be interpreted as inappropriate proximity between employer and employee regarding political matters." "Meaning?" Alexander's voice was sharp. "Meaning the Duchess has cultivated relationships with staff that blur professional boundaries. She attends their family events, provides financial assistance beyond wages, solicits their opinions on policy matters." Hargrove flipped through his notes. "This creates an environment where employees might feel obligated to support her initiatives, even if not explicitly coerced." Eliza stared at him. "You're saying I'm too close to the people who work for me. I'm saying it creates the appearance of impropriety." "The appearance?" Eliza leaned forward. "Not actual impropriety, just the appearance. In matters of public trust, appearance often matters more than reality." "That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard." Hargrove's face hardened. "Duchess, I'm trying to help you. If you continue down this path, treating staff like peers, involving them in political causes, you will attract scrutiny, the kind that can destroy reputations and undo legislative victories." "Let me understand this correctly," Eliza said, her voice cold. "You're suggesting I maintain appropriate distance from my employees, treat them as subordinates rather than human beings, and in doing so protect my reputation at the cost of the relationships that make this estate function." "I'm suggesting you be strategic. I'm being human." Hargrove closed his portfolio. "Then you'll continue to face inquiries like this one. Anonymous complaints, government oversight, public suspicion. Is that really worth it?" Eliza looked at Alexander. He was watching her, waiting. She turned back to Hargrove. "Yes, it is." Hargrove stood. "Then I've done all I can. Our report will note no evidence of coercion, but it will also flag the concerning dynamics we've observed. What happens next is up to you." He left. Alexander exhaled hard. "You just made an enemy." "I made a choice." Eliza stood, walked to the window. "He wanted me to go back to treating people like they're beneath me. I won't do it. Even if it costs you everything you've built?" She thought about that. About the laws passed, the lives changed, the example set. "If the foundation is treating people like objects," she said slowly, "then maybe it deserves to crumble." Alexander crossed to her, turned her to face him. "You're the bravest person I know, and the most infuriating. I learned from the best." He kissed her then, brief, fierce. "We'll weather this, like we weather everything else. Together? Always." The report was released a week later. It was damning in its moderation. No evidence of wrongdoing, but concerns about judgment. Questions about sustainability. Implications that Eliza's methods, while well-intentioned, were naive. The backlash was immediate. Political opponents seized on it. Conservative papers ran editorials questioning whether a woman, especially one married into power rather than born to it, should be influencing policy. Social circles whispered. Invitations dried up. Catherine called it the price of progress. Eliza called it exhausting. She was in the library reading the latest scathing editorial when Kerrigan appeared. "Your Grace, there's someone here to see you." "I'm not receiving visitors." "She says it's urgent. Lady Helena Crowley." Eliza's blood went cold. "Absolutely not." "She says she has information about the inquiry, about who filed the complaints." Eliza set down the paper. "Where is she?" "The front hall. I didn't let her pass the door." Smart man. Eliza found Helena standing exactly where Kerrigan had left her, just inside the entrance, looking around like she owned the place. She'd aged. 3 years had added lines around her eyes, gray to her hair, but the venom was still there. "Duchess," Helena said, "how kind of you to see me." "I'm not seeing you. I'm hearing what you have to say. Then you're leaving." Helena smiled. "Direct. I always appreciated that about you. You filed the complaints." "Actually, I didn't." Helena pulled a letter from her bag. "But I know who did, and I'm willing to give you their name." "Why would you help me?" "Because I'm tired." Helena's smile faded. "I've spent 3 years plotting revenge, pulling strings, calling in favors. And for what? You're still here. Your marriage is solid. Your reforms are passing. Nothing I do makes a difference. So you're giving up?" "I'm accepting reality." Helena held out the letter. "This contains the names of the 3 people who filed complaints against you. All of them are connected to Lord Ashton, the man you embarrassed at that dinner 3 years ago. He's been orchestrating this from the beginning." Eliza took the letter carefully, like it might be poisoned. "Why tell me?" "Because I'm done being someone else's weapon." Helena met her eyes. "I hated you for taking what I thought was mine. But you know what I realized? The life you have, the work, the scrutiny, the constant fighting, I wouldn't have survived it. You did." "Is that supposed to be a compliment?" "It's supposed to be the truth." Helena turned to leave, paused. "One more thing. The inquiry isn't over. Ashton's planning another round of complaints, more anonymous accusations. He won't stop until you're discredited. Then I'll fight him." Helena looked back, something almost like respect in her eyes. "I know you will. That's why you'll win." She walked out. Eliza stood holding the letter, her mind racing. She brought it to Alexander immediately. He read it, his face darkening with each line. "Ashton, I should have known. He's been working against us for years. Because you made him look foolish in front of his peers. Men like him don't forget slights. So what do we do?" Alexander was quiet for a long moment. Then, "We go public." "What?" "Ashton's entire strategy depends on staying hidden. Anonymous complaints, behind-the-scenes manipulation. We expose him, force him into the light." "How?" "We hold a press conference, present the evidence Helena gave us, name him directly as the source of the false complaints, make him defend himself in public." Eliza's pulse quickened. "That's incredibly risky." "So is doing nothing." Alexander set down the letter. "He's betting you'll crumble under pressure, that you'll back down to save your reputation, prove him wrong." She thought about Peter, about Sarah, about every worker who'd spoken up during the staff meeting. "All right," she said. "Let's do it." But the press conference was held at the estate 3 days later. Reporters packed the drawing room, 24 of them, notebooks ready, skepticism thick in the air. Eliza stood at the front, Alexander beside her. She'd rehearsed this, prepared every word. But standing in front of the crowd, she felt her carefully constructed speech evaporate, so she spoke from the heart instead. 3 years ago, I accidentally signed a marriage contract. It was the worst mistake of my life. Murmurs rippled through the room. Not because I married Duke Vane, she continued, but because it thrust me into a world I didn't understand, a world that judges women for having opinions, that punishes change, that values appearance over truth. She pulled out Helena's letter. Recently, government inspectors investigated this estate based on anonymous complaints. Those complaints alleged that I coerce my employees into political activism, that I exploit my position for personal gain, that everything I've built is a fraud. She held up the letter. This document proves those complaints came from 3 individuals, all connected to Lord Ashton, a man who has spent years trying to discredit me because I once challenged him at a dinner party. The room erupted, questions shouted over questions. Eliza raised her hand for silence. I'm not here to wage war on Lord Ashton. I'm here to tell the truth. The people who work at this estate are not coerced. They're respected. They're heard. And when they choose to participate in political causes, it's because they believe in those causes, not because I forced them. She looked directly at the reporters. You can choose to believe Lord Ashton's manufactured accusations. Or you can talk to the workers yourselves, interview them, check our records, see if you find any evidence of coercion. I welcome the scrutiny. A reporter in the back raised his hand. Duchess, some critics say your methods are too radical, that you're upending centuries of tradition. How do you respond? I respond by asking, which traditions? The ones that let workers die in unsafe conditions? The ones that treat people like replaceable parts? If those are the traditions we're upending, then good. It's about time. Another question. What if this destroys your reputation? Eliza smiled. My reputation was destroyed the day I married Duke Vane. I've been rebuilding it ever since. If it gets destroyed again, I'll rebuild it again. That's what you do when you believe in something. The questions continued, some hostile, some curious, all probing. Eliza answered every one. Bien. The story ran in every major paper the next day. Some painted her as a radical, others as a reformer. A few called her naive, but they all printed her side of the story. And 3 days later, Lord Ashton issued a public statement denying any involvement in the complaints. The denial was weak, defensive, full of legal hedging. Nobody believed it. His reputation crumbled faster than Eliza's ever had. Within a month, he'd resigned from his position, withdrawn from public life, disappeared into his country estate, a ghost of his former influence. Eliza felt no satisfaction, just exhaustion. Bob. Spring turned to summer. The inquiries stopped. The complaints dried up. Public opinion shifted, slowly, grudgingly, back in Eliza's favor. She didn't celebrate, just kept working. One afternoon, she was in the estate office when Alexander appeared in the doorway. Come with me, he said. I'm in the middle of... It can wait. She followed him outside, across the grounds, to the family cemetery. 3 headstones stood in the corner. Mrs. Brennan, Anne, Thomas. Fresh flowers sat at each grave. Who's been leaving these? Eliza asked. The staff. They take turns. Every week, someone brings flowers. Alexander knelt beside Anne's headstone. I asked Peter why. He said it's because you taught them that people matter, even after they're gone. Eliza's throat closed. You changed this place, Alexander said quietly. Not just the policies or the buildings, the soul of it. You made people believe they matter. We did it together. No. He stood, turned to her. I provided the platform. You provided the courage. There's a difference. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small velvet box. Eliza's breath caught. I know we're already married, Alexander said, but I never properly asked, never gave you a choice. He opened the box. Inside, a simple gold ring. Eliza Whitmore Vane. Will you marry me? Not because of a contract, because I love you, because I can't imagine doing any of this without you, because you're the best thing that ever happened to me, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving I deserve you. Eliza stared at the ring through blurred vision. You're ridiculous. Is that a yes? It's been a yes for 2 years. You're just now asking. He laughed, surprised, relieved, slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. I love you, she said, even when you're infuriating, even when you make terrible decisions, even when... He kissed her, cutting off the list. They stood in the cemetery, holding each other while the sun set behind Asheford Hall. And for the first time in 3 years, Eliza felt something settle in her chest. Peace. 5 years after that, Eliza stood in the House of Lords. Not in the gallery, on the floor. Parliament had passed a bill allowing peeresses in their own right to sit in the Lords, It was narrow, contentious, hard-won, but it passed. Eliza was one of the first women to take her seat. Alexander watched from the gallery, Charlotte beside him. Their mother had passed 2 years prior, peacefully, in her sleep, surrounded by family. Charlotte had married her merchant, built a happy life, visited often with her 3 children, who terrorized Asheford Hall in the best possible way. The estate thrived, the reforms expanded. Other duchesses and countesses followed Eliza's lead, using their positions to push for change. It was slow, frustrating. 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but it was progress. Eliza took her seat among the peers, men who'd spent decades blocking the very reforms she championed. The Lord Speaker called the session to order, and Eliza spoke her first words as a member of the House of Lords. "I rise to propose an amendment to the Factory Safety Act." Her voice was steady, clear, unapologetic. Alexander smiled from the gallery. Bosom. That night, they returned to Ashford Hall. The house was warm now, full of life. Staff who smiled, children who played in the gardens, a home in every sense of the word. Eliza stood in the main hall, looking at the portrait that hung above the fireplace. It had been painted 2 years ago. Her and Alexander standing together, no rigid formality, no cold distance. Just 2 people who'd chosen each other. Behind them in the painting, the rebuilt East Wing, a symbol of everything they'd fought for. Alexander came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. "Tired?" he asked. "Exhausted." "Want to stop?" She leaned back against him. Not even a little. He kissed the top of her head. "Good, because I'm not done yet either." They stood there in the quiet, surrounded by the home they'd built from the wreckage of a mistake. "Do you ever wonder," Eliza said, "what would have happened if I'd signed the right contract?" "Every day." "And?" "And I'm glad you didn't." He turned her to face him. "Because this, the fights, the changes, the life we've built, none of it happens if you don't walk into that solicitor's office and accidentally become mine." "Yours," Eliza repeated. "I don't belong to you." "No, but you chose me." "That's better." She smiled. "Yes, it is." 10 years later, historians would write about the Ashford reforms, about the Duchess who changed labor law, about the marriage that started as a scandal and became a revolution, but none of them would capture the truth of it. The late nights fighting over policy, the arguments that ended in laughter or tears or both, the small moments, a hand held during a difficult vote, a knowing look across a crowded room, a whispered, "We've got this," before stepping into battle. The truth was messier than the history books would admit. It was mistakes corrected and new mistakes made. It was progress earned inch by bloody inch. It was 2 imperfect people choosing each other every single day, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. Because that's what love is. Not a contract, not a transaction, not a fairy tale. Just a choice, made over and over again. And Eliza and Alexander chose each other every time. 20 years after the accidental signing, Eliza sat in the library at Ashford Hall, writing her memoirs. The publishers had been asking for years. She'd finally agreed. Alexander appeared in the doorway, older now, gray at the temples, but still the man she'd fought beside all these years. "How's it coming?" he asked. "Slowly. I keep getting distracted by how ridiculous it all sounds written down." "The truth usually does." He sat beside her. "What part are you on?" "The day I signed this contract." "The day that ruined your life?" "The day that saved it," she corrected. "I was going to spend my whole life invisible, taking care of everyone else, never asking for anything, never being anything. And now? Now I'm a pain in Parliament's ass and the wife of an occasionally tolerable duke." He laughed. "Occasionally? Don't push it." He took her hand, the one that still wore both rings, the original wedding band and the one he'd given her in the cemetery. "I'm glad you signed the wrong contract," he said. "So am I." Outside, the sun set over the estate, over the rebuilt East Wing, over the gardens where staff families gathered for summer picnics, over the school they'd built for tenant children, over the monument to Mrs. Brennan, Anne, and Thomas, over everything they'd built from a single mistake. Eliza looked at Alexander. "Do you ever regret it? Any of it? The fights? The scrutiny? The constant battle? Yes. Not for a second. He kissed her hand. You? Not one. They sat together as darkness fell. Two people who'd turned an accident into a legacy. And when Eliza finally put pen to paper again, she wrote, "This is not a love story about perfection. It's a love story about choice. About two people who were thrown together by chance and stayed together by will. Who fought the world and each other and somehow came out stronger. Who learned that love isn't about finding someone who completes you. It's about finding someone who challenges you to become more than you were. I didn't choose Alexander Vane that day in the solicitor's office, but I've chosen him every day since, and that has made all the difference." She set down the pen. Alexander read over her shoulder. "Perfect. It's honest. Same thing." Eliza closed the journal, turned to him. "What do we do now?" "Now?" He smiled. "We keep going, together." "Always?" "Always." And they did. Because some mistakes aren't mistakes at all. They're the beginning of everything.